We saw something we weren't supposed to see. I'm posting this here to make sure that this is recorded at least somewhere, in case anything happens. I will go into only the required amount of details of the environment, per stated in rules. I was driving out of Nowheresville for spring break at around 1 to 3 a.m. with a friend, Jeb, and had to stop for utilities just off the highway. Let's just say that this stop was far from any type of civilization, which I'll get to. The gas station was closed, so we decided to go in the bushes. For context, it was in the middle of a severe thunderstorm. Felt like driving through a constant car wash. As we're relieving ourselves, Jeb says, "Hey, can you see that giant rock poking through those woods on that hill?" Me, yeah I can, just barely though. Jeb, look on top of it. And there was a barely visible outline of a person standing on top of the rock. You could tell they were trying their best to stand perfectly still, yet also having a staring contest with us. It was clear they weren't wearing any sort of attire for the rain. Of course, we sprint back to the car. Jeb says, "I think it was a girl, but it's so hard to see in this rain." Me, "Car beats some rando without a car 9 times out of 10, so let's find out." We pull out, and were able to angle the car so that the brights could point at the rocks. We knew it made little difference in the storm, but tried anyway. The brights barely revealed 2 grown men working together to both drag something large, and appeared to be digging behind the rock from our view. Both were in completely blacked out clothes. We could tell they were definitely okay with getting soaked, but what sent chills down our spines, other than seeing the one originally, was that for the split second they looked back at our lights, both were wearing what appeared to be Halloween masks, or at least something covering their faces that looked like it could have been dark-painted hockey masks, before they were able to drag the large trash bag-looking thing fully behind the rock. Words cannot describe how fast I got back onto that highway. There were no other cars in the area, and we could tell that the woods were isolated to just a patch besides the highway. Still not sure what it was that we saw, but the conditions lined up perfectly to have no witnesses. I couldn't come up with a logical reason for this, so I hoped others here might have one. You grab one, I'll grab the other. The year was 1991, and I was 6 years old living in Winnipeg. My family was already in the middle of an unthinkable nightmare. My 10-year-old sister, Robin, had just passed away. I was the only child left, and the grief in our house was heavy and suffocating. I went over to my friend Holly's place just to get out of the house, looking for any shred of normal childhood. We decided to do what we always did, ride our bikes around the block. It was a beautiful, quiet summer day, the kind of afternoon where you feel like nothing bad can happen. But on our 3rd lap around the neighborhood, the atmosphere changed. We noticed the van. It was a beat-up white freezer van. No windows in the back, just a solid, rusted metal shell. As it pulled up beside us, it didn't just drive past. It slowed to a crawl, and the engine had this horrible, rhythmic rattle to it. A sound like metal grinding on metal. Being so young, we didn't immediately have that stranger danger alarm go off. We were mostly just confused. We actually slowed down and stopped our bikes to see what they wanted, and the van stopped right along with us, idling heavily. The passenger window was already down, revealing a pitch-black interior that seemed to swallow the sunlight. I looked at the passenger, and the images burned into my brain. He was gaunt, with yellowed teeth, and long, frizzy, straggly hair that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. Then, the world seemed to move in slow motion. The passenger door swung open. The man put one heavy foot out onto the pavement, shifting his weight as if he was about to lunge. At the same time, I heard the heavy, clunky thud of the side sliding door beginning to retract. The passenger didn't even look at us. He turned his head back into the darkness of the van and said 7 words I will never forget. "You grab one, I'll grab the other." He said it loud enough for me to hear it clearly, like he didn't even care that we were listening. Pure, cold adrenaline hit us. We didn't scream or cry. We just slammed our feet onto the pedals. We were only a few houses away, and I remember my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. We didn't even stop to kick our kickstands. We ditched our bikes right on the grass in the driveway and scrambled inside, slamming the front door and throwing the lock. Holly's mom was in the house and was immediately confused. Seeing us burst in crying and shaking, she assumed we had just fallen off our bikes and scraped our knees. We were gasping, trying to tell her a van was following us, but to her, the rattling engine she could hear outside just sounded like normal street noise. There was no reason for her to be afraid until she looked at us and saw the sheer terror in our eyes. She then went to the front window, and her face went completely pale. She saw the van. She watched as it slowly, deliberately crept past the house, almost at a walking pace, with our bikes lying right there on the lawn like neon markers. They knew exactly where we had gone. She stayed by that window, her hand on the lock, telling us it was going to be okay, but she never took her eyes off the street until that rattling engine finally faded into the distance. When my mom came to pick me up later, she was already a shell of herself from the loss of my sister, telling her that I had almost been taken, that she had almost lost her only remaining child in the same week, devastated her. It was a second trauma piled on top of a fresh wound. It's a weight I still carry, realizing that if we had just been a few seconds slower, my mother would have been completely extinguished. So, to the man with the yellow teeth and the people in the back of that rattling white van, let's not meet. Clinically crazy ex-boyfriend. I met Austin in the fall of 24 via a message he had sent me over Facebook. I was lonely, really lonely. I had just moved to a new city with very few friends because I transferred from community college to university, so I gave him a chance. I messaged him back and we began chatting. We had a mutual friend, so I thought nothing of it. Maybe she told him about me. Maybe he had seen me in passing. Time began to pass and we got much closer. Soon, I met him in person for a date. After this date, things began to move very fast. We hung out all the time and stayed at each other's places almost constantly. He was so sweet at first, and I was excited to be around someone I believed was so genuinely kind. Fast forward a couple of months, and I move into his apartment. It was a bad idea, I know, but my current living situation was growing increasingly more toxic, as I was living with 6 other girls. This was when things began to go downhill. He introduced me to his daughter Lily. She was so sweet, and I adored her. He didn't get to see her much, as he would tell me his baby mama was insane and keeping her away from him to control him. But as I got to know him more, he began to grow more violent towards me. It started with small things like yelling at me over misplacing a phone charger or not putting something where he thought it belonged. But as time began to pass, the instances of his anger increased and became more dramatic. He would scream at me almost every single day. It was always my fault. If he lost his keys, if I was home from work later than expected because he needed childcare, if I went to visit family or friends, it didn't matter what the situation was. Everything was my fault. In addition to this, he was serially cheating on me, as I would find out later. He was texting a multitude of girls from the ages of 15 to 22. He was a 25-year-old man. Some more time passes and we moved to a much larger apartment in a different suburb of our city. Things were well for a while, and I still remained oblivious to his horrible internet activity. After a very late night at work, he wakes me up and shows me a little tiny kitten. "I found her at work and brought her home for you," he whispered to me. I named her Stripe, and she was my soul cat. Me and this little kitten did absolutely everything together. About a month passes, and I come home from work pretty late in the evening, as I was a server at a bar. He was infuriated at me as he needed childcare so he could go to work. On top of that, he had lost his keys and it was all my fault. He screamed in my face, called me names, and began to escalate the situation while I just sat with tears rolling down my face. At some point in his anger, he grabs Stripe and throws her against the bathroom floor because she bit him. She weighed less than 3 pounds, and it wouldn't have hurt. She began to have a seizure and in my arms on the way to the emergency vet as I gave her CPR. He had just killed my kitten in cold blood. For more context, he had also had a dog named Cookie that he point of seizures. I'm so glad that I was able to say I kept this dog and did not allow him to have the dog back again. I felt so trapped. I had no friends to reach out to, No family I felt safe staying with. I was isolated with a very dangerous man. I feared walking in the door. I feared leaving the house. I feared him. I was so depressed I was contemplating suicide because I couldn't afford the rent alone as he was spending my money on top of his money. I had nowhere to go and nobody to help me. More time passes, August 2025, and I uncover his internet activity because one of the girls he was texting messaged me. That was the final straw for me, so I broke up with him. We still lived in the same space, however. He was in the bedroom for his daughter, and I was in my own room. Flash forward to November of 2025, and he verbally assaulted me, saying absolutely nasty things. This escalated to him trying to choke me, throwing me all around the house, and being physical to the point that I feared for my life. I tried to leave and he wouldn't let me. He tried to take my animals and let them out somewhere. He tried to hold a gun to me. It was scary. I thought I was going to die. I couldn't call the cops because they would take us both in the state that I'm in. They would have booked both of us as he had gouged himself with his car keys to make it look like I injured him. I had finals the next day and was scared to fail all of my classes as I could not afford to repeat them. But at some point, I do decide to take the risk and call the cops, but he breaks my phone by snapping it in half. I decided to run for my life, and he forcibly took my house key, but I had my car keys, so I ran. I then drove until I got to my father's house and fell asleep on his couch. From this point on, he would not leave me alone. I got over 100 calls and text messages per day, going from kind to abusive almost every 2 messages. I moved in with my very distant mom and take my animals somewhere safe. I pleaded with him to leave the apartment because he wasn't on the lease, but he repeatedly refused as he wanted to fix our family. I began to settle in at my mom's house and see people that I know and start reconnecting with old friends. As time passes, so do the holidays. I got over 50 calls on Thanksgiving and 100 on Christmas and New Year's. He was still threatening me, still harassing me, but I remained at my mother's. I finally convinced him to leave my apartment, threatening a CPO and hoping that he would leave me alone so that I wouldn't have to go through with it because I was scared of it being denied. On January 10th, I got to move back into my apartment. It was trashed. I spent 2 weeks working to put the pieces together and resume some form of my life. I had within the past couple of months started seeing someone long distance, casually. He was lovely and offered to help me clean up all of the pieces of my life, which was not something he had to do. My ex still harassed me from his number, as well as fake numbers posing as a stalker threatening my life. He posed as a different person in some of the texts, saying he was going to get me. In February, I couldn't take it anymore. I filed the CPO and was granted an ex parte based on my testimony, though I was still getting texts from the fake numbers threatening me, saying they knew where I was and what I was doing. After the court hearing, it all stopped. It was finally silent. I was finally safe. He still tries to mess with me, like giving my number to people saying that I'm easy, or making posts that relate to me with my friends telling me that they've seen something weird. He tried to get family to reach out to me, and they wouldn't. Now I'm happy. I'm seeing my childhood best friend, and we're in love. He's so kind, and exactly what I need. I feel safe. But I still look behind my back all of the time to see if someone is following me. I still get texts from numbers asking if I'm easy, then telling me that they got my number from Austin. I still need to seek therapy. I still need to file a report of him violating his CPO. But overall, I'm happy. Let's not meet again, Austin. I hope you get what you deserve. Nothing.
It was 1999. I was 15 years old at the time. I just recently turned 30 this year, and had lived in South Central Texas since about the age of 8. My family had moved from Mexico a few years back, and I had settled in what still is a rather upper-middle-class neighborhood in one of Texas's burgeoning metropolitan suburbs. For most of my youth, I'd been interested in a variety of fringe topics, mostly reading commentaries and viewing whatever documentary I could find on some of America's most notorious serial killers. At one point, upon arriving at college, I briefly considered criminology as a field of study. As a consequence of this fascination, Saturday nights were often spent with my older brother watching episodes of Cops and America's Most Wanted. The gears that set this story into motion deal with my dad's affinity for yard work and the maintenance of his property. When we had initially moved in, the back portion of the house was in a poor, though somewhat acceptable for him, state. The grass was overgrown and in some parts ill-maintained. The same could be said for the perimeter of the property, which, after some time and work, saw considerable renovation and upkeep. The deck was another story. From the purchase of the home, it remained worn and considerably dilapidated. In short, my dad became a self-taught handyman, and as the years came and went, he performed most of the maintenance duties of the home himself, sometimes with the help of his sons and wife. In due time, the house became his own personal project, even converting the back portion of the house, our family room, into a recreational gym area. However, the deck was not something he felt could comfortably be completed in the same way. Outside his difficulties with carpentry, the time between work and family also presented problems. He decided to call a friend concerning a possible reference. My dad had, at odd intervals, previously contracted a Mexican-American man, Rogelio, to perform the odd job around the house. Rogelio had earned my father's trust. His character and work spoke on his behalf. On short notice, Rogelio notified my father the Sunday before he was scheduled to arrive that he could complete the work the upcoming weekend, and for him to set aside time and money for supplies. The Friday before he was set to arrive, he called my father and explained that his regular attendant would not be accompanying him. He would be bringing another attendant. Early the next morning, between 7 and 8, the doorbell rings and my dad goes to greet Rogelio and his attendant, a Mexican man with a rather unkempt appearance about him. My dad escorts them around the side of the house to the backyard, and they commence their work. During breakfast, I would often look out to the backyard as our kitchen always provided us with ample view of our yard, and realized that something was not right. The deck they were working on was attached to the recreational gym area, which itself is attached to the house and leads to our yard. The main entrance to this room consists of a large floor-to-ceiling glass sliding door. Once inside, the room itself is comprised of wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Visibility is abundant from both inside and outside the house. During breakfast, I could see Rogelio's attendant looking around, shielding his face from view whenever possible. My brother and I at the time shared a room. When playing video games later that morning, he mentioned to me on several occasions that something appeared off with the man Rogelio had brought over. Always the observant one, he mentioned to me on several occasions that he felt as if he had seen this man before. The more we both attempted to locate the source of our suspicion, the more uneasy his presence made me. Later on that day, my father insisted, out of hospitality, that my mother take Rogelio and his attendant something to drink. I objected to this, and asked my dad if I could do it instead. He did not see the need for further objection, and I proceeded to take the men their drinks. Once outside, I offer each of the men a can of Sprite. Rogelio thanks me and resumes work. His attendant, however, is avoiding looking anywhere near my attentive stare. A can of Sprite held out for him to grab. It is at this moment that I begin to notice some peculiar features. Rogelio's attendant had very dark skin. It looked like he spent a lot of time outside in the sun. His hands were rather large and rough, even more so than my father's. He displayed a mustache, but was not properly trimmed or groomed. He had longish hair and overall appeared disheveled and unkempt. I wish I had a more eloquent way to express what I felt when he finally looked at me, other than to say that I felt his gaze portrayed a very real and pure evil. He stared at me, or into me, I am not sure, with what appeared to be extreme dislike or derision. Perhaps even hatred. I wanted out of there. Thankfully, he took the Sprite and I excused myself. I would then recount to my brother and mother how I also now felt I had seen him on television before. Saturday came and went. The men would be returning on Sunday to complete their work. We attended church and afterward performed our customary routines. Sometime around 1 in the morning, Rogelio returned with the same attendant in tow. The attendant's appearance had not changed one bit. I decided that Sunday I would exercise while the men worked outside. I cannot say for sure what drove me to do this other than a very childlike disposition for curiosity, despite the fact that the thought of being anywhere near Rogelio's attendant made me uncomfortable, and in hindsight my intuition was setting off all kinds of alarms. I feel that my persistent curiosity got the better of me. I don't remember being out there for long, but the attendant spent the brunt of the time I was out there staring at me just like he had the day before. On one occasion, I was pretending to stretch. I looked up to see this man staring at me. The stare was intense, violently hungry, like an animal stalking his prey. If he could smell fear, I am sure he could not only smell it, but see it written all over my face. Needless to say, I went back inside. Around 5 in the afternoon, the men completed their work, received payment, and were on their way. Later that night, my siblings and I were watching The Simpsons when, during a commercial break, the local Fox affiliate announced that the notorious railroad killer, Angel Matarino Resendez, one of the most wanted men by the FBI, was sighted in our city today. This man was wanted for the murder of at least 15 people in the United States and Mexico. His nickname came as a result of many of the murders happening along railroad tracks after train hopping throughout the United States. The television displayed footage from a security camera taken at a local gas station of a man purchasing some items at the counter. I still remember the silence in the room. We were all staring in disbelief at the man that had come help install our new deck. There he was, on the television, wearing the same clothes, the same unkempt appearance, the same dark disposition. The television then reported on the location where the footage was taken, at the gas station in our suburb, a mere 5 minutes away. It was at this time that my older brother was finally able to place him. He is the one the FBI was looking for on America's Most Wanted. The rest of the night was quite a haze. I remember fearing that he would break into our house and kill us all. He had seen us, he had seen me, and I wondered if he thought I had recognized him. The house was equipped with a pretty robust alarm system and a pit bull out back. Still, the thought of him thinking that I had made him froze my blood solid. The deck is still there, although it did not weather time all that well. Angel Matarino Resendez was executed in 2006. To my knowledge, my father never confronted Rogelio about the man's identity or where he had picked him up. There exist railroad tracks about 10 minutes away from the house.
The man with the watch. Trigger warning. Attempted harm to minors. Hi. This happened like 20-ish years ago, when I was maybe 9 or 10, but it still keeps me up every now and then. I was on my way home from school, taking the tram since my school was fairly far away from my house. At the time, I didn't have a phone or watch yet, so I looked out of the window when we stopped near a church tower to see what time it was. After we departed for the next stop, a middle-aged balding man in a brown coat approached me and asked me if I had got the time. Seeing as I had just looked at the clock outside, I told him what time it was, and that is where most interactions would end. But then he sat down next to me. At that point, I hadn't really known much of stranger danger, but in my culture it's not even that common to talk on the tram, so it wasn't something I was used to. He chatted with me and seemed friendly enough, but at some point he asked me, "So, what station do you get off?" I told him the station and he got excited and said something along the lines of, "No way, me too." Call it instinct, but my gut told me that something wasn't right, and I wish I had listened. He got off the tram with me and continued to walk. There was something weird about the way he talked. He just seemed way too eager to get to know me, while I kept my answers brief. At this point, he had been walking next to me for 5 blocks. I was pretty sure he wasn't one of my neighbors, because I knew almost all of them, at least a little bit. As he walked next to me and his arm swung up, I also noticed he was wearing a watch. If he had a watch, why ask a random kid what time it was? Something wasn't right, and I finally decided to listen to my gut. I decided to walk past my house, since I figured that whoever this guy was, I didn't want him to know where I lived. He continued asking questions, and I walked towards the playground in the middle of our apartment blocks. None of the other apartments had their main entrance on the side, so I knew for a fact that he wasn't just walking home himself. Then, he grabbed my arm. I was terrified, and he told me, "You're such a beautiful boy. Do you know that?" Before I could react, he tried to reach under my shirt. I screamed in his face, and that seemed to startle him. He let go, and I took that as a chance and ran as fast as I possibly could. I ran across to another building block, around the second one, and then went to my door from the other side so I wouldn't run into him again. I locked the door to the apartment complex, which we shouldn't do in case of emergencies, but I didn't care at the time. I went home and calmed down, but every time I went on that tram, I kept looking for him. Luckily, I never saw him on the tram or around my neighborhood again, but to the guy with the watch, pretending not to know the time to get closer to a little kid, let's not meet again. Lumberjack, Cowboy, Gunman. When I was 13, I lived in a pretty sketchy city in New England. One of those places that was known by the entire state to be ghetto, and plagued with lots of drug and gang activity. However, I had moved there when I was 9, and by then, it was 100% home to me. I loved it despite its reputation. Plus, since I never really caused any problems for anyone, I could get along with any given person I met. I had run-ins with some fairly dangerous people who ended up becoming close friends because I really just enjoyed chatting it up with folks. To sum it up, I was very naively confident in my safety around town. One night, I went into the local supermarket to grab some basics while my mom waited in the car. I had just gotten through the entrance and into the seasonal products section when I saw a man walk in. He stood out to me immediately, as he was extremely tall and stocky. I was a 5'7" girl at 13, so it wasn't like I was short, and the height seemed drastic in my brain. I was very used to 6-foot guys, even 6'5". This guy had been at least 6'8", and built like a linebacker. His outfit was weird too. He was wearing a red flannel shirt, which alone wouldn't be unusual for my region, but had added a giant cowboy hat. He locked eyes with me immediately, and I felt a cold chill. I tried to keep shopping as normal, but I felt him staring. I glanced back to see him walking towards me, and I walked further down the aisle casually to try to keep distance between us. Then I looked again to see him picking up his pace while still staring. At this point, I was terrified because I knew I wasn't going crazy. This guy was definitely following me. I jogged down the rest of the aisle and turned. Then he started running after me. I felt so panicked that I abandoned my shopping basket and left the store. Then I bolted across the parking lot and jumped in my mom's car. She asked what was wrong, and I told her that the store was just out of stuff we needed. She didn't ask any further questions, and we drove home. The next afternoon, I had stepped off the school bus and started my walk home. It was about a 5-minute walk up to a winding road to get to my apartment building from the bus stop. I made it to my place with no incident, and went through my usual routine of having a nap, doing homework, etc. My mom came home around 6 from work, and told me she had seen police at a house down the street. Apparently, it had been robbed at gunpoint, and they were still looking for the guy. We were a little shook, but I tried to carry on with the night. Later, while we were watching TV in the living room, we saw police lights outside our window. It wasn't clear exactly what was going on, but after about 15 minutes, a police officer knocked on our front door. He informed us that the man who committed the robbery down the road was found in the woods right outside our place. He had been sitting there for what they guessed was several hours, pointing his handgun at our window that looked directly into the living room, where I was napping. I felt sick immediately and went to my room upstairs. We saw him on the news the next day, and lo and behold, it was the same man from the supermarket that had chased me. I broke down and told my mom the full story. I never felt quite the same sense of safety in my city afterwards. So, to the lumberjack, cowboy, gunman, let's never meet again.